Now, there was some very sad news came in sort of yesterday. This man, Bert Sugar, who was 75 years of age and seemed to have been born with either a fedora or a Panama hat on his head, died. He actually had lung cancer, even though he always still had a cigar. He didn't light it, I don't think, for about the last 5 years, but he always had it in his mouth. And but he actually had a cardiac arrest, a heart attack, in addition to the lung cancer. He was a great character, so I thought, you know what, the only person I know, and I really mean this, and I'm not top spinning this, the only guy I know that could properly pay homage to Bert Sugar would be another eccentric New Yorker. So I reached out a bit earlier to Mike Marley. I had to get him on the phone earlier, and I started by asking Mike, who I knew had known Bert forever, if, like me, he thought that Bert Sugar was going to live forever.
You know, his most famous quote came back to me after I wrote a nice tribute to him last night on Examiner.com. His famous quote about somebody mentioned to him once, Bert, maybe you have too much time in the bar, or too much alcohol. He said, I'd rather be a good liver than to have one. But he was a great guy. He was a bon vivant. Everybody loved him. You know, he had great stories, anecdotes, jokes. You know, he was really a raconteur of boxing, and also a baseball and boxing historian.
You know what, Mike? He was an old-style broadcaster, an old-style journalist, in the sense that he could actually tell a story. And I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to come across like I'm old, and I know you're not much older than me. But that ability to spin a towel whilst you're standing at the bar with a big cigar, that's lost nowadays, Mike, isn't it? It's a fade. It's something that's gone.
You're exactly right, Steve. And you know, he would have fit in with over on your side of the pond with the old Fleet Street type characters, because he was something like out of the Damon Runyon era. You know, he always wore the fedora in the winter and the Panama hat in the summer. Always had a cocktail in hand. Always had the cigar going.
You know the thing with the cigar, Mike, I don't know about you, but whenever I'd do a little bit of filming with him, he would only start to speak at that perfect moment, just as the cigar smoke started to vanish. His face and his words would appear. And if it got it wrong, if the smoke went too fast or went too slow, he'd ask you to film again. I mean, what I love about him is he tended to make all of that stuff he did look like it was just easy and off the cuff, but he worked everything he did. He was a craftsman, Mike.
Yeah, he was a classic character, and Steve, I actually have a photograph of him. I have to dig it up. It's in my garage up in Cape Cod, but I have a photograph of Bert Sugar with no cigar and no hat from the Muhammad Ali-Jimmy Ellis fight in Houston, Texas.
No way!
I may donate that photo to the Boxing Hall of Fame.
Oh, you should do, because that's a rarity, because I can't remember ever seeing him without the fedora, the Panama, or a cigar, whether it was lit or not lit. I can never remember in 25 years.
Now that he's gone, Steve, I can reveal the reason for the hat. The original reason for the hat was that Bert had no hair. He was bald.
I guess that was the case.
I don't think he would. You know, there were a couple of incidents. One time, some guy at Madison Square Garden grabbed his hat, and Bert chased him up 8th Avenue till he got him and retrieved the hat.
Mm-hmm. Mike, he could be a little bit feisty as well, couldn't he, with people? I mean, you know, sometimes, you know, he wasn't afraid to stand his ground if people disagreed with him.
He was a man of many opinions. You know, going back to the colorful character, he was from, I think, 1979 to 1983. He was the editor at The Ring magazine. And as great an editor and a prolific writer, you know, he wrote more than 80 books.
Unbelievable.
Bert was not a very good businessman. He bounced checks to most of the writers, including yours truly.
And me as well.
Oh, okay, you're in the club too. But I went and I said, Bert, you had a check for $300. It bounced. He said, Mike, no problem. He called everybody uncle. He said, Uncle Mike, I'll write you a check for $600. I said, how will that bounce? He said, like a basketball. In those days, he you know, his office, the Ring office, was on West 30th Street, but he held court during office hours and beyond at an Irish pub on West 30th known as O'Reilly's. That was really where his office was.
Yeah, you mentioned at the start of the interview Damon Runyon, and that's very much really where Bert belonged. Listen, Mike, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I wish it could be longer, but we've dealt with Bert. Maybe we'll get you back on. I'll tell you, we'll get you back on in a couple of weeks, just before the Mayweather-Cotto fight. How about that?
Sounds great. Okay, Big Daddy, take care. Cheers.
Well, that was Mike Marley talking to me a bit earlier, and that's the first time, and I've known Mike since about, 1986, 87. It's the first time I've ever heard him sound a little bit subdued. Now, there is a classic piece of Mike Marley footage. Mike was a lead-in, no, he was not a lead-in, he was the lead-in boxing scribe in America. He was the Big Daddy in the 80s and the 90s, and he was always there. If there was a fight, he was there. If there was a press conference, he was there. And if there was a crazy incident, he was there. Now, in this thing I'm going to show you, and some of you may have seen it, and some of you may never have seen it, in which case you're just going to keep Sky Plusing it and watching it. It's staggering. Mike's in this. He's at the start. He's the geezer with a perm, the white geezer with a perm and the Hawaiian shirt. Take a look at this. I know, I'm telling you, whether you've just had a bath, whether you've just come in from work, or whether you've been home all day eating Doritos, you're going to love this clip.
You ain't got no business talking about his wife. Hey. You ain't got no business talking about my wife. Kick me. Punch me right here in front of everybody. Allow him to kick me and punch you. Come on.
Oh my God. Larry Holmes, he punched me. Look at that. He's showing Mike Marley, he's showing the state of his shirt. And then suddenly there's a moment there with Mike with his perm. And there he is there, there's Mike. He's taking down notes. Larry Holmes punched me. And then suddenly you just see Mike, he just goes like this. Because he can hear something. There it is, Larry Holmes. 18 stone when he's not fighting fit. One of the best heavyweights in history. Running like the Bionic Man. Running like the Bionic Man down the top, and he jumps. And that was obviously Trevor Berbick and Larry Holmes having a bit of an altercation. Now, we're right in the middle of the amateur boxing season at the moment. Obviously, the top GB boys and women are going all around the world, just finishing the different qualifications to go out to the Olympics. Or not go out to the Olympics, go to London to the Olympics. But there's some really big stuff happening. I just want to give a bit of a shout-out, and people have been tweeting and emailing. Just want to give a bit of a shout-out to a guy called Sid Khan. He trains boxers, amateur boxers. There's the email address. It's bunce@boxnation.com, and you can tweet me at Big Daddy Bunce. Now, Sid Khan at Earlsfield, okay, he's got three boxers through to the semi-finals of the ABAs. Louis Adolphi at 63 light welter, Kurt Garvey at light heavyweight, and Big Joe Joyce. Now, Adolphi and Joe Joyce are actually the GB champions. They won that on the BBC back, thinking about December. And also, Aaron Morgan, the captain at Islington, is through at middleweight. It's been a brilliant run. And up in Leeds, Bertmantoff, what a great club that is. They've got a GB squad member at light fly, little Jack Bateson. I tell you what, Jack Bateson's about a year too young, otherwise he would have been going to the Olympics. And also Iksham Tyson Loan. And finally, Dow Youth, James DeGow and George Grove's old club. They've got a guy through at cruiserweight, Dion Juma. I don't suppose any of these guys will go to Olympic qualifiers. One or two of them could. But you know what? They're worth a mention because the amateur scene at the moment, I tell you what, it's fantastic. It's healthy. It's brilliant. Okay, let's